March 3rd of 1972. It's just after midnight. Officer Ray Shockey, he's patrolling Riverside Drive as high beams cutting through the sleet. The road's slick and is quiet, well, until he sees something up ahead sitting in the center of the lane. At first it looks just like roadkill, just a dark shape hunched over. But then it moves. The thing stands up maybe 4 foot tall, maybe a little bit more. Its skin shines like wet leather, and its arms hang long, way too long. Yellow eyes reflect in the headlights, and one webbed hand grips the guardrail, and then, without a sound, it jumps. One clean leap takes it over the rail. It lands in the opposite lane and turns back towards the cruiser and just stares, mouth wide, full of sharp teeth. Steam rolls off of his shoulders, almost like a swamp fog of some sort. Shockey doesn't even move. His foot won't even touch the gas. And the creature tilts his head and slides into the cattails and disappears into the dark, leaving only ripples and a smell that he'll never forget. Back in the cruiser, Shockey grabs the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 37. Possible creature on Riverside. Looks like a man-sized frog. I need backup. Tonight, we're chasing that very call. This is Police versus the Frogman. A salesman's bridge encounter in 1955, 2 police reports in 1972, and a 6-second phone clip that went viral in 2016. Did the officers in Loveland, Ohio really see and even shoot at a river creature that no one's ever classified? Or did a few strange nights just spark a legend the town never stopped telling? We'll walk through every report and look at every single theory, and at the end, you get to decide. Let's retrace the echoes, if you dare.
Like, comment, subscribe, or I'll leap through your screen.
April 1955. Traveling salesman Robert Hunnicutt's behind the wheel of his 54 Chevy. He's heading down US Route 42 after a long day of selling cookware out in Farm County. He's tired. He's been traveling for hours, and the only thing keeping him alert is the sound of the rain and the river rushing alongside him. You see, on his right is the Little Miami River, and is swollen after weeks of constant storms. Brown water crashing right there on the banks and moving fast. Now, there's no moonlight, no street lights, just his headlights reflecting off the water in streaks of silver. Up ahead, he sees the outline of a bridge. The Kemper Road Bridge is an old steel lattice, and tonight the iron beams, well, they're slick with rain, dripping like strings of glass beads. Now, Hunnicutt smells the damp metal through the vents, and he drops the car into second gear as the engine gives a little tired cough. Then he slams on the brakes. See, right in the middle of the runoff, we're talking right underneath the bridge, stands 3 little figures. They're about waist high, thick bodies, and their skin is slick and dark, almost like they've been dipped in oil. And when the beams of the headlights hit them, they didn't move. They didn't even flinch, nor did they even blink. They don't look human, but they don't look like anything else either. Just wide, blank faces. And in addition, huge mouths. Then one of them lifts a tiny metal rod, and out of nowhere, sparks blast sideways, bright and loud, almost like a welder touching any kind of steel or metal. The smell hits him instantly, burned rubber mixed with old sour hay. Hunnicutt doesn't think, he floors it, gravel flicking out from underneath the tires as he flies through the rain. Now in his rearview mirror, he sees blue sparks flashing against the bridge's beams, and that's all before the road disappears behind the downpour. About 30 minutes later, he's hunched over a coffee at the Riverview Motel, hands still shaking. He tells the night clerk everything, the 3 frog-faced beings, some kind of electric wand, and a bridge that he's never driving across again after dark. Now, 2 days later, the Cincinnati Post runs a short story. Just 6 lines. That's all that it would actually take. And from there, the name, the Loveland Frogman, it stuck. And it stuck for good. You expect April rain in Loveland. That's not strange, but what's under the town? That is a completely different story. You see, Loveland sits on something called karst limestone, basically rocks that crumble into caves and tunnels when the water works its way through it. Now, early surveyors, they logged just over 40 caves just inside of a 5-mile stretch, and locals say that if you dropped a marble in the right hole, it might pop up possibly a half a mile away. Now, here's the part that matters. Those caves, they stay a constant and steady 55 degrees, regardless of what month it is. That's perfect for anything that's cold-blooded. It's not too hot, not too cold, just to prevent anything from freezing. Add in a steady food source. We're talking about crayfish, minnows, all the critters that live in the little Miami. And you've got yourself a hidden buffet that never shuts down. And then there's what the humans did. During Prohibition, bootleggers, they cut secret tunnels through roads just to move liquor. In the 1930s, the WPA widened them. And after World War II, local factories, they started draining their warm wastewater into some of those very pipes. Now, some of those discharge outlets still pump water that's 8 to 10 degrees hotter than the river. That's like building an underwater heat vent and leaving the lights on for anything looking to hibernate. So imagine something that's evolved in the dark, in water, in silence, and when winter hits, it tucks itself into those little pipes and it waits. When spring hits, that's when it steps out for a quick little meal and ends up face to face with a patrol car on Riverside Drive. You can drain a swamp, you can pave over a trail, but Loveland's ground, it's still full of holes. If something moved in a long time ago, it wouldn't be in any kind of hurry to leave. June 1963, a Cincinnati gambler named Eddie Lucky Daly leaves the Miami Valley horse track with his 2 pockets turned inside out. 2 mortgage payments, they're now down the drain on a long shot that didn't quite pay off. It's past midnight, and the fog's starting to roll across the fairway near the Loveland golf course. Now Daly's behind the wheel of his Buick. He's half mad and he's half asleep when all of a sudden, something big, it cut across the bend. He slams on his brakes, but is not fast enough. The front end crumbles like a soda can. He stumbles out, and he was pretty sure he hit a deer, but what he claims he saw wasn't on 4 legs. He described it. It was a frog-headed brute, maybe 5 feet tall, and it was scrambling into the cattails, but here's the weird thing. No blood, no fur, no feathers, just a nasty green smear across the grill, and a stink that smelled almost like fish that had gone sour. Now, deputies, they filed it as a vehicle strike, animal unknown. They never find a body, but the repair shop, they logged the damage, and right there on the receipt, written by hand, dent caused by an upright amphibian, per the customer. Daly later tells the paper that he lost money, he lost some sleep, and he lost any urge of driving those back roads after dark. Now, it doesn't make the front page, and most folks just treat it like a throwaway. But every legend has a quiet entry point, something small. Sometimes all it takes is, well, just a little dent. It's now March 3rd of 1972. It's just after midnight, and Patrolman Ray Shockey's behind the wheel of his unit, cruising down Riverside Drive. It's cold, and the windshield's fogging up. The road's covered in black ice, and it looks like broken glass under the headlights. The heater's blowing, but it's losing the fight. To his left is just all open pasture, and to the right is frozen cattails and riverbank. Then something catches his eyes as he passes the spotlight. It's hunched over near the guardrail. Now Ray eases off the gas and drops to about 15. The thing stands up, 4, maybe 5 foot tall. Arms is hanging low, extremely low. The elbows, they bend backwards, almost like a grasshopper's. The hands, they're webbed. The eyes amber-colored, glowing, and locked on the cruiser. And it never blinked. Now imagine you're sitting in that very seat. Do you grab the mic? Do you grab the gun? Well, before Ray can even make a move, the thing leaps. One smooth, silent vault clears the entire guardrail. It hits the oncoming lane and crashes and coils like it's ready to spring again. Its skin reflects like an olive green in the beams. It stares at the cruiser for a second, just stares, then it dives down into the reeds, vanishing with this soft, wet rustle that barely stirs the air. Ray slams on the brake and the cruiser fishtails just a little bit. His heart's hammering in his chest. He grabs the mic, trying to steady his voice. Dispatch. Unknown animal. Mile marker 14. Might be an injured person requesting backup. Now 10 minutes later, 2 more cruisers they pull in. The officers fan out with their flashlights, searching the area. No blood, no tracks of any kind of human that led anywhere, but there was a few 3-toed prints that was melted into the ice. That's it. No sign of costume, no explanation. Now Ray, he didn't even pull his weapon. Department policy says that unless you're fired upon or unless there's an immediate threat, and let's think about it, there was icy pavement all over the place, you would hold your shot. By morning, the frog jokes they were already flying in the break room. Ray stays quiet, but the report he writes down that night, he never changed a word. Not then and not even years later. He always said the same thing. The creature never blinked. It never slipped. It never looked away. And that's how the Frogman officially made it into the police reports.
Like the episode or else? I bet you don't say a word in the comments, 'cause you're scared.
Now let's fast forward to March 17th of 1972. That's exactly 2 Fridays after Ray Shockey sighting. Officer Mark Matthews, he's on the late shift. The rain's coming down hard, hitting Riverside Drive almost like gravel tossed against a window. It's exactly 11:57 when dispatch crackles through the static. Roadkill reported, possibly a stray dog. Mile marker, you guessed it, 14. Same stretch, same river fog. Matthew pulls up and sees a dark shape off to the right-hand side, just past the white line. As the headlights roll over, he sees right away it's bigger than any dog that he's ever seen.
What in the hell?
It was slick and tailless, chest rising, like it's breathing. He gets out of the cruiser, flashlight in one hand, service revolver in the other. He gets within maybe 6 feet, and that's when it sits up. The mouth drops open, 2 rows of small, sharp teeth catch the beam of the light. The eyes flare up, bright enough to wash out the pupils. His training doesn't even have a chance to kick in. Reflexes pulled the trigger. The .38. It cracks. His palm jumps with the recoil. He hears a thud, almost like a wet towel slapping concrete. The thing jerks, and then belly crawls off the road into the cattails and disappears. No sound, no splash. Just the reeds rustling for just a few seconds. And then nothing. Matthews climbs back into the cruiser, his heart pounding, hand shaking as he keys up the mic. Dispatch! Shots fired. 1 round. Unknown animal fled towards the riverbank. No further contact. A few minutes go by and all of a sudden, searchlights sweep the area. Officers spread out on foot, boots crunching across the ice. They find a shallow drag path, almost like something heavy slid through there. A few 3-toed prints yet again. But here's the weird thing. That's it. No blood, no shell casing either. The only thing you could think is maybe the recoil, maybe it kicked into the weeds. Now the official report says species, large tailless iguana, presumed abandoned pet. But over coffee a few hours later, Matthew tells a fellow officer, I've owned iguanas. They don't move like that. And they don't stay active in 55-degree rain. The memo that week tells officers to keep the cryptid jokes off the airwaves. Matthew says nothing more, but in his locker, he writes one more note to himself. The eyes, they never blinked. not even when the bullet hit. And now, the Frogman story. It includes gunfire. Now, after the shot was fired, Loveland, it kind of went quiet. I mean, the police radios, they were dead silent. The chief put out a one-page memo, no talk of frogmen over the airwaves, and absolutely no wisecracks to reporters. Now, from 1973 all the way into the late 80s, the word frog had completely disappeared from patrol logs. I mean, the calls didn't stop, but now they were labeled prowler with no contact. Same stretch of Riverside Drive, in fact, the same exact mile marker. The local papers, they run a quick 4-paragraph update. One and done. Morning radio shows, they start calling the creature the Gloctopus, at least for a few days until the advertisers, they start pulling out. Even Shockey and Matthews, they stop telling their stories. Unless it was like a backyard cookout, and only after someone breaks out the cooler. The official line becomes very simple. Large iguana. Likely an abandoned pet. Case closed. But you see, silence doesn't mean that nothing's happening. People who live near the river, they keep their windows locked. Fishermen in the area start swapping stories about midnight croaks so deep that it rattles the bottom of their aluminum boats. In 1975, someone anonymously drops a note in the city clerk's inbox. It says, install better lights at mile marker 14 before someone else fires in the dark. The request dies in the committee. By the mid-1980s, the Frogman's name, it isn't in print, is passed around in whispers. Now, high schoolers, they drive to the bend, killing their engines and counting to 30, waiting to hear webbed feet slapping on the road. Now, most nights, there's only wind. But the boldest kids, they swear that something's still out there, that something's moving the cattails, that it stays just out of reach of the headlights. Now, it might sound like the story's ended, but in Loveland, it wasn't over. It was just holding its breath. Now, back in 1991, disposable cameras, they were showing up on the shelves of every single drugstore across America, but we're talking about Loveland, Ohio, and the Loveland Frogman, he turned into a side hustle for local teens. See, on Friday nights, kids would carve out these little rubber stamps, and they would shape them like 3 webbed toes. They would go to the riverbank and they would press them into the mud. They would snap a few photos, and they would mail the prints to all the cheap tabloids, hoping for $20 a shot. Now, most papers, they just laughed it off. A few actually ran them, and for a while, mutant frog tracks ended up in checkout lines next to Bigfoot sightings and horoscopes. Now, the prank wave, it peaks around 1994 when a reporter points out the same exact stamp pattern showing up on 3 different sandbars, all 10 miles apart, all photographed the same exact night. Then comes July 7th of 1999, just before sunset. Local fisherman is out on the Little Miami drifting mid-river on a john boat casting for catfish. Now behind him, he hears that splash. He would turn, lift his disposable Kodak camera, and snap one photo. Just one frame. A dome-shaped head breaching the water. No ripples. Just amber eyes catching the very last bit of light. Nostrils wide like it's coming up for air. Now, when he would pick up the prints, the drugstore clerk would just shrug. You see, there was no negative. Just one 4x6 photo in the envelope. Some call it a glare. Some call it the real deal, but one thing's clear. In 10 years of hoaxes, it's the only image that no one's been able to fake. And in a town like Loveland, that's enough to keep the story alive.
This next one's unverified. They never saw me, but it's a fun story.
Let's fast forward all the way to August 3rd of 2016. It's about 11 o'clock at night, and college students Sam Jacobs and his girlfriend Megan, well, they're walking the gravel edge of Lake Isabella. The phone spotlight bouncing with every single step. Now, Pokemon Go had just released the summer spawn list. and the app's telling them a rare polywag is somewhere in the reeds. Sam, he was swinging the light right over the water, and that's when he sees it. 2 glowing orange spots like eyes floating just above the surface, and then they blink and rise to about shoulder height. Sam whispers, "Did you see that?" and hits the record button. Now the 6-second clip he captures is shaky, but it's clear enough. A frog-shaped torso, chest high in the lake, standing upright in waist-high water. Now the arms, they look long like human arms. The skin has a glassy green shine to it. It would turn, the eyes would flare bright orange, and then it drops straight down into the water. No splash, just smooth water. Now Sam posts it with the caption, IRL, Polytoad? By the time he wakes up the next morning, the video's already past 500,000 views, and by lunchtime, Loveland Frogman is trending across Ohio. NBC in Cincinnati plays it on repeat while the anchors argue, is this just smart lighting? And a kid in a wetsuit, or is it something else? Now debunkers zoomed in on one frame and they said that you can see the fishing line. Someone else says that the glow matched a $40 solar garden frog that you can buy down at the old local hardware store. And a kayak group, they paddled out there later and they said all they could smell was pond scum, no sulfur and no alfalfa like had been reported in other cases. But you see, the Loveland Chamber of Commerce, they weren't waiting for anyone's verdict. 2 days after that video went up, they printed a bunch of Frogman Festival t-shirts in 3 different neon colors, and they sold out before the weekend craft fair ended. Now, believers say that the proof of the legend never dies, and skeptics say that it's just a clever hoax that helped the town cash in. But either way, people are still watching the 6-second clip on loop, asking the same thing. If it really went under, what's to stop it from coming back up? Now let's look at things from the other side. First, the iguana theory. Officer Mark Matthews, the guy that pulled the trigger in 1972, he stood by his report for the rest of his life. What he shot? Well, some say a large tailless iguana, probably 3, maybe 3.5 foot long. Now, they say that they think that maybe someone dropped it off and realized that Ohio winters, well, maybe they're not that great for tropical pets. In cold weather, a reptile like that would look for heat, maybe even climb up on the road and freeze in place, especially near a warm engine. When startled, it might raise up on its back legs like some lizards do, then make a break for it. Simple explanation, no mystery creature required. Next, we have the high school hoax theory, where some skeptics point to a long-running prank tradition in Loveland High School. Apparently, back in the late 60s, one of the art teachers was said to have had a latex casting kit for theater masks. Now, what they say is a student made a frog head. He put on some waders and waited for just the right time, possibly spring, when the runoff was just high enough to hide in the seams. Now, one good scare turned into 3 different retellings. You add a police bulletin and suddenly a prank becomes a legend. Now next, I want to jump to the Pokemon story of 2016. I'm talking about the 6-second clip of the Frogman in the lake. Well, skeptics say it's a mix of shadows and nerves and timing. Around the same exact time, there was this local hardware store that was selling a solar-powered frog. It was a garden light. It had 2 glowing orange LED lights on a stake. You would stick it by the pond and it was supposed to scare off raccoons. Well, what if you catch that light at the right angle? You add a shaky phone and a bright flash and, well, maybe what you see is not what you get. Maybe it's not an ornament. It's a monster. And that smell? Well, there's an answer for that too. People oftentimes talk about burnt rubber and alfalfa. That in fact has been smelled in multiple sightings, but chemical engineers say that there's a certain compound that can vent from the warm wastewater pipes. And it smells exactly like that, especially when the cold air traps it low on the ground. And here's the thing, we got 3 main sightings in 70 years, no bones, no fur, no clear photos until disposable cameras became common. Most prints either melt in the slush or show up on the front page next to a tabloid horoscope. And there's never been a confirmed sighting in broad daylight by two unrelated people at the same exact time. The bottom line is, if this creature is real and biological, skeptics say it wouldn't stay hidden very long in a place full of trail cams and anglers and drone hobbyists. The simple answer? People see what they want to see. Sometimes it's a scared driver. Sometimes it's a bored teenager. Sometimes it's a blurred video that goes viral because it could be something. Skeptics say that the Loveland Frogman lives best in old headlines, not in the reads. But believers? Well, they've got a few thoughts of their own, and they're up next. Now let's hear from the believers. First, they talk about the two trained officers and the same creatures. Now, skeptics will say that it's just a misidentified animal, but the believers always point out that when it comes to the officers, Ray Shockey and Mark Matthews, they were both trained police officers, and these guys, they are constantly making split-second decisions and deciding things like the height of things and the size and the threat level, and yet both men describe the creature as standing between 4 and 5 foot tall. Both mentioned webbed hands, and both said the same eerie thing, that it never blinked. Two separate reports, 2 weeks apart, filed by two different men who did not compare notes. Now, that kind of consistency is kind of hard to fake, especially if you're just some kid in a mask. Now, next we're going to talk about the spark wand detail back all the way in 1955. Now, the salesman described a metal wand that shot these blue sparks. Now, think about this. I mean, this happened decades before cosplay props and those handheld stun guns that you can buy online. I mean, nobody in the later hoaxes, none of the kids in the 90s, and none of the viral clips in 2016 ever tried to recreate any of that. Believers say that if it was a hoax, you'd expect the coolest part to be copied, but it never did. I mean, that makes it feel less like a gimmick and more like a guy that saw something that no one would ever be able to explain or even to fake. Next, let's talk about the land. Now, the land favors something hidden. Loveland sits on that limestone, full of caves and runoff pipes that stay a steady 55 degrees year-round. Now, zoologists have discovered new amphibians every single year, some no bigger than the size of your fingernail, some that glow in the dark. Now, frogs can glow and salamanders can breathe through their skin. Is it that crazy to imagine a 3-foot version that lives in the deep river tunnels that only comes out when the timing's right? Lastly, I want to talk about science. Now, I know what you're saying. The believer segment has some science? Well, kinda. People love to say things like no body, no monster. I mean, we've been saying that about Bigfoot for how long now? But think about it for just a second. Black bears lived in Ohio long before there was DNA to prove it. Folklore, it usually shows up first, and then science, well, it catches up. And the Frogman legend, well, it's changed a little bit over the decades, but the core, it always stays the same. We're talking about something that's upright, something that's amphibious, it's riverbound, it doesn't blink. So whether it's a real creature, misunderstood tech, or just the river playing tricks, believers say the Frogman keeps jumping out of every theory the skeptics try to pin it down with. Until they give something definitive, well, the mystery, it still has room to breathe and maybe blink, if it ever does. Next, I want to talk about some fringe theories. Now, not every single explanation fits neatly into a science book, but that does not stop people from talking. First, I want to talk about interdimensional theories. Some UFO researchers, they point out that 1955 spark wand, well, it sounds less like biological features and, well, more like technology. I mean, they float the idea that the salesman, what he saw wasn't a frog at all, but something that stepped into our world through a temporary doorway. Now, that could explain why sightings are so spread out. and why we've never found any remains. Next, I want to talk about the chemical mutation theory. Back in the 1960s, there was this rubber plant runoff that entered the river. And science does back this part. Certain industrial chemicals are known to cause deformations in amphibians. We're talking about things like extra limbs, unusual growth, and changes in behavior. Some folks have wondered, what if bullfrog populations was exposed to that very thing and they did it for years? Could that kind of long-term mutation eventually produce something that looks and moves a little too close to human? Next, I want to talk about the cave creature theory. Now, geological surveys, they showed dozens of unmapped caves all along Little Miami. And herpetologists, they have documented strange cave-dwelling amphibians that have evolved in total darkness, some blind and some even glowing. If there's a species that we've not quite discovered yet, could it be living deep underground and surfacing only when it needs to feed? Now, none of these theories have hard proof behind them, but each one fills in the gap between the iguana and the prank stories. And sometimes, what keeps a mystery alive is what we can't rule out. Next, let's talk pop culture. Now, the Frogman, he did not stay hidden in the shadows. Over the last few years, he's made his way onto the stage in films and local festival booths. Let's talk about 2014. The Cincinnati Fringe Festival debuted a full-on bluegrass musical comedy called, I'm gonna try not to laugh, Hot Damn, it's the Loveland Frog. I can't help it. I think it's funny. That was the actual title. There was banjo, square dancing, and a guy in a full rubber frog suit singing love songs to river algae. It's sold out. Not once, but a bunch of times. The musical basically turned the Frogman into a camp icon. Then came the streets. By 2023, Loveland's winter event, Hearts of Fire, they added a full-size Frogman mascot. Bright red scarf and everything. Now people lined up for selfies. City Hall said that out-of-town attendance would jump 28% just thanks to the mascot alone. Now also in 2023, there was an indie team that dropped a found footage horror film called simply, you guessed it, Frogman. It was shot guerrilla style along Little Miami River and ended up with a final scene captured entirely by simulated police body cam. Now, there's certain bloggers that loved it. Now, cult fans, they called it one of the year's weirdest cryptid films, and that's saying a lot. And finally, he got his own festival, the Frogman Festival. Real name, launched with vendor tents and panel talks and a Riverside scavenger hunt. Now, they was hoping that maybe 200 people would show up, but 700 showed up with field guides and phone gimbals. So now, a creature that supposedly never blinks is staring at you from a t-shirt, possibly an enamel pin, beer koozies, and even a city banner. But all that attention, it kind of raises a fair question. Does this kind of pop culture love keeping the mystery alive or turn it just into another piece of merch? You get to decide. Today, we started this entire podcast talking about Patrolman Ray Shockey's 1972 report of an upright frog-faced figure leaping a guardrail and disappearing into the reeds. 2 weeks later, we talked about Officer Mark Matthews. He filed a shooting report, one round fired at what was later called a large tailless iguana. Same mile markers, same riverbank, same vanishing act. Then we jumped ahead 44 years. Sam Jacobs captured 6 seconds of a shaky video showing what looks like the same exact shape. Frog-headed waist deep in Lake Isabella before it would drop straight down without even making a ripple. 3 sightings spread across nearly half a century, and all in the same part of Ohio. All with the same question left behind. Was it just a misidentified lizard? Or something else living alongside us the whole time? Let's settle it. Now, we've followed the Loveland Frogman from a late-night bridge sighting in 1955 through 2 police reports, 1 bullet, a 6-second phone video, and even a bluegrass musical. Now, skeptics say it's just a case of misidentification, an iguana, a rubber mask, maybe a pond light caught on a shaky phone. Believers, they point to 2 trained officers who saw the same thing, cave systems deep under Loveland and a viral clip that no one's been able to fully explain. Fringe theories, they bring in everything from chemical mutations to undiscovered species living in the dark. But through it all, one thing hasn't changed. We still don't have a body, just a story that never seems to go away. So where do you land? Is it a hoax, a hidden species, or something that we don't have a name for yet? Now, if you've ever walked Riverside Drive, fished Lake Isabella, or caught something strange on camera, be sure to send it our way. If you want to be the first one to know when the story stirs again, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, goodbye.